Welcome to Washington Watch. I'm Joseph Backholm, sitting in for Tony today. Grateful that you are with us. We've got a great lineup today. Several interesting stories we're going to cover. The Biden administration appears ready to end feeding programs for low-income children in Florida because the schools aren't willing to let boys into girls' locker rooms. We'll tell you more about it. As well, a bill currently advancing in the California Assembly would give the state of California temporary emergency custody over children in order to help them get transgender surgeries and hormones. We'll talk more about one of the most radical threats to parental rights ever debated in the U.S. At the end of the show, though I am sitting in for Tony today, Tony will join us from Chicago, where he is with a group from the RNC helping to chart the course of the pro-life movement in a post-Roe world. And so we'll catch up with Tony today as well. But first, our top story today. In recent decades, we've become used to governors, mayors, and other elected officials refusing to enforce the law because they don't like it. And that's why it was a surprise to many when, today, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis suspended Hillsborough County State Attorney Andrew Warren for neglect of duty after the prosecutor refused to enforce bans on abortion and transgender surgery in his jurisdiction, which includes the city of Tampa.
When you're saying you're not going to enforce certain laws you don't like, that's a neglect of duty. That, quite frankly, is incompetence as defined in Florida law. And Florida courts have been very clear that saying you're just not going to enforce the law is, by definition, a dereliction of duty.
That was Florida Governor Ron DeSantis explaining his reasoning for the suspension. Now, this decision by DeSantis perhaps sets a pattern for how red state governors will handle certain blue city officials in their state. Joining me now to discuss this is John Stemberger. He's the president and general counsel of the Florida Family Council. John, good to see you today.
Hey, great to be with you again, brother.
You know, so many times, so many people are just jealous of you in Florida and the leadership that you have in the governor's mansion there. But what was your reaction to learning that Governor DeSantis had suspended a state attorney for refusing to enforce the law?
You know, Joe, once you just think you have an amazing governor, and then he just impresses you once again. He's a force of nature, and if it wasn't clear before, it should be clear now. There's a new sheriff in town, and he's not putting up with nonsense. This is remarkable. As you may know, your listeners may know, there were 90 state attorneys that recently announced that they were not going to enforce the law, and only one of those state attorneys were actually in Florida, in Tampa, and that's Andrew Warren. And so what he did, really, as the chief executive officer, and the role of the executive is to enforce the law, right? And so he's doing what he's supposed to do, making sure the law is enforced. And he's even willing to remove elected officials who are derelict in their duty, like this fellow Warren. And so that's what we saw today. It's a remarkable move. We as a movement just had a roundtable discussion about how we're going to enforce the law. And we were brainstorming various ways that could be done, assuming that there was no recourse, but he's given us a whole new avenue of saying, hey, we're going to hold governors now accountable to the question, are you going to remove state attorneys and law enforcement people, including sheriffs, that refuse to enforce the law when it comes to abortion, or even in this case, transgender surgeries and those laws as well?
Now, John, Andrew Warren, you mentioned, is the name of the attorney who was suspended by Governor DeSantis. He is himself an elected official. Some will look at this and say, this is an abuse of power. A governor can't remove somebody elected by the people. Only the people can do that. Why is that not the case?
Well, because the Constitution allows us to do it. He has constitutional powers to remove elected officials who he's removing for incompetence, for derelict of duty, and whatever. And he's going to be held accountable at the polls as well if the people want to do that as well. That is Governor DeSantis. But I think the people are going to reward him for his courage and for actually making sure that the law is enforced here in Florida.
Now, as I mentioned in the lead up to this story, we've seen examples of this for many years. When Governor Newsom, now Governor Newsom, was the mayor of San Francisco, he was conducting same-sex wedding ceremonies before those were even legal. Public defiance of the law is not exactly a new thing. Why do you think we haven't seen steps taken like this to remove people who are acting in defiance of the law?
I think that most political figures, they just lack courage. They're in it for themselves. They're in it to get along. They're not willing to take risks. And Governor DeSantis is saying, look, we're going to enforce the law. We mean serious business here in Florida, and we're not going to put up with woke nonsense. And so the fact that he's drawing such a clear line is remarkable. And as I'm hoping, as you just mentioned, this will provide an example for other governors around the state as well. Hey, here's the standard right now for the future. If you're not going to enforce the law, get out of your job, because that's what your job is for.
Yeah. John, do you think that's going to happen? Are other states, other executives going to look at this and say, hey, maybe we should be removing some people as well?
Well, it's certainly going to cause a conversation amongst law enforcement officials around the country. George Soros has put his state attorneys in all over the country. And so I think that, it's a two-way accountability here. They are elected officials, but so are the governors, right? And so we'll see what happens. He's replaced Mr. Warren with a highly competent judge to replace him for the time being as state attorney. And so, I hope that in academic circles and in professional circles in law enforcement, and even like the Federal Society and legal places, this begins to be discussed as a legitimate constitutional use of the executive's power. And so this is very encouraging to me here in Florida.
John Stemberger, Florida Family Council, we remain jealous and we're grateful for your time today. Thanks so much.